All right, hello. We're going to go ahead
Hello,
and
hello,
get
hello.
started. I'm going to bring down the overlay, and here we are.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about you, Tommy?
Pretty good, as you know. As you know, yeah.
We're definitely fully prepared, and there were zero technical issues coming into
Yep,
today.
yeah. And if any of my day one Instagram followers are here, they will know organization is my middle name. So
Absolutely.
they know what to expect at this stage. So this is on our YouTube, Seymour, is it?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Okay. Would you mind if I go ahead and introduce the antidote and myself and then hand it back over to
Please,
yourself? Yep.
please go
Okay,
ahead. No,
fantastic.
man, this is all you. Go ahead and kick us off, man.
Yep. Okay, so my name is Tommy. I am from Dublin. Most of the people that have followed my YouTube are here because I begged them to come for my Instagram. Since COVID, I've been geopolitical blogging on Instagram for about 3 years, and I've had a great idea. I believe it's great for a media collective for a lot of people in the Western countries. We're in our twenties and younger. A lot of people feeling very helpless over this world system and the brutality of the wars we're seeing and being waged in our name in Western nations. So we have a great idea for a media collective. And Seymour is a colleague I met through this page, who we really are aligned with. And we're going to working long term now in a project to make maybe a media collective with something a little bit extra and something actually probably that's not been done before in the 21st century. We want to set up a media collective of really committed revolutionaries. There's no other word that understands the information war that's happening right now, that understand that Western hegemony and their wars they launch for domination is the gravest threat to humanity in the world today. So this is just our first step on this long journey that we have ahead of us, and it's called the Antidote. So we want to do a weekly stream every Sunday where we sum up two or three of the main news stories. We give some of the facts. We help explain the background of the situation for viewers that might not have much context, and then we give our own opinions and analysis. So we want to create a new kind of system. Sorry, not a new system, but a new approach, and we want to go in the forefront. So what we're going to do here is going to be mainly counter propaganda, but also helping to foment new narratives, new progressive narratives, because we are Westerners. I'm from Ireland, probably the most Americanized, Westernized country in Europe with a very neoliberal economic system. Seymour is from the heart of the beast, the belly of the beast. He's
Oh
there
dear
in
God.
Dallas, Texas. Yeah. And hence why Seymour has to hide his anonymity. Now he is a little bit more to lose in life than me. Fair enough to him. And also, I have to acknowledge that the cancel culture and the political polarization in North America right now is actually far more volatile than in Ireland anyway. Now there is other issues on the continent in Europe that make it very tense. But in Ireland at the moment, maybe due to our history and our culture, I can speak against the absolute BS in the propaganda MSM media and not really worry about facing too much what you call it, sorry, repercussions really. Not to the
Mm.
same extent that someone in a corporate job in America might face at this moment, because we know the political atmosphere there really is so intense, and people lose their jobs for their opinions all the time. We hear about this all the time. So just to explain that. So this is our weekly stream starting. We're going to commit to this time, which in my local time, which is UTC 0 + 00, is 5 p.m. So that's hopefully a time that can accommodate European viewership, especially Eastern European, as well as some North American viewership. Although, albeit it's quite early in the morning for you guys, not everybody might be in the mood for intense, heavy geopolitical discussion. But yeah, that's the time we've chosen, and that's what we're going to go with. And wish us
Hey
the best of
man,
luck.
if they're not at
Yeah,
church, they better be tuning into some geopolitics. That's what I'm saying, man.
yeah. Seymour, do you want to just introduce yourself like I did there? No, I
Yeah,
didn't give much away about myself, really, to be honest. But yeah, do you want to hop in?
absolutely.
Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, hopefully, folks that are tuning in today are familiar with Green Wreath's work. I essentially was just a Green Wreath follower for a bit, but through some good luck and connections made, we got in contact and are now working a little more closely together, which I deeply appreciate. And folks, hopefully, this is like Tommy said, the beginning of a snowball effect of more media types, rather than having solely, although please let's maintain those, solely disparate sort of individual footprints in the info war, things getting a little bit more unified, strategic, right? Geopolitical lines and assessments of
Indeed.
where we're headed as, a Western world in the face of a multipolar world, which we are happy to see, and how to respond accordingly, and how our media can help, attune Western audiences to this new reality and get them prepared for the coming changes so that it's not a reactionary hellhole when such changes
Yeah.
appear. That is my main goal here. But just for a little bit more context on me, I am I'm a media professional by trade, and that's the main reason why I want to get involved in the information war in a way that's a little more concrete and that puts my skills to use. So you can imagine being a rather sheltered or sort of I don't know, you know how Americans are, man. It's like one language, it's English, and that's about it. And I'm lucky enough that I grew up with a Colombian mother. So I, at the very least, even though Colombia is also a rather, reactionary hellhole in and of itself, although things are improving somewhat.
And they, if I can add, they have a long, honourable history of struggle.
Yes, they
And
do.
and it's been American bastion of imperialism in the region. It's not been easy for them, and the struggle continues to this day. So,
100%.
just solidarity to them, I guess. Sorry
Of
to
course,
interrupt.
of course. But that at least just gave me a foundation of some other connection outside of the West, or at least a little bit of self-awareness that, we have we have a reality outside of just our sort of synthetic bubble here in the U.S. And so, having some performance skills, some larger sort of public speaking skills, I guess. I was led into a journalism career, studied that, landed in the media sphere, and I would say training to be a journalist was probably one of the first radicalizing things in my life, because it becomes very evident how much, especially if you are a radio, TV reporter, anchor, when you go through the training process of being a journalist, while yes, they give you, they tell you to, be objective and make sure to fact check and all this stuff, it draws a certain kind of careerist, professional to the trade in the first place. And once you actually get in the field, any semblance of you are a bastion of the fourth pillar of government is long gone, and you are now a stenographer or an entertainer or a storyteller passing off as a committed journalist. And that farce was a big part of what drew me slowly but surely into the world we're at now, which is finally wanting to do something with these skills that feels productive and focused, and hopefully, using some media training and background and a good radio voice
Yeah,
to,
indeed,
right?
indeed.
To
Yeah,
hopefully try to,
yeah.
guide our Western audiences towards better media literacy, and just engage in discussion that gives us a better grounded material analysis for what is happening in the West, how we are shaping global events worldwide, and how, while we get caught up in so much of the culture war here, the reality of things is that most of our standard of living in the West dictates the standard of living and the geopolitical realities of the rest of the world. The U.S. middle class, quote unquote middle class, the petit bourgeois, we are kind of like our stability more or less defines what happens to the rest of the world. And if our politicians think that they've got us on enough, sort of cultural, spiritual, and literal narcotics, then they can go ahead and charge forward with their plans for essentially financial and political hegemony, or more simply, world domination. So that's my perspective. That's where I'm bringing things, and I'm really, grateful to be here to at least just provide a lens that is relatable to Western audiences that are trying their best to understand what's going on in the world around them and hopefully better prepare folks for some of the shifts that are to come.
Thank you very much. Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. Really well said. And that's basically an outline of the mission of this media collective we want to set up. And that is well beyond just this stream. You understand? So it's going to be across multiple platforms. This is just the very beginning. But I guess to sum it up in a sentence, our raison d'etre is to combat propaganda and to help give honest Westerners a chance to see the right side and to come to the right side of history. Because look, none of us chose where we were born, and there's a lot of good people in the West. Now, we are all somewhat complicit in this system and allowing this post-truth environment to develop in the West, and the kind of consumerism and the hedonism and the nihilism, sorry to use these big words, but there's good people who want to know more, and the mainstream media does not provide that for them. It only just fills them with hatred, really, for the Americas, or for the Western Empire's next enemy. And to combat that and to help decent people born in really the criminal part of the world, which is the West now. And I don't reference just America, because what we've seen really in the last 5 years is that the Western European bourgeois are really, they've put their eggs in the American Empire's basket. Von der Leyen, a lot of the really imperialist, vicious European diplomats. Let's think of Boris Johnson and like his destructive role in destroying the peace process in Ukraine. They're all as bad as each other. Do you understand? This Western world is a single entity, and giving just people in the West, born unfortunately like us in these crazy times, where our living standards are deteriorating all the time, giving people a chance to come across to understand what's happening in this world. Why are these wars proliferating? Why are our living standards decreasing so rapidly? That's hopefully what we're going to be getting at in the long term, and building a community of people who get this, who see the world like us, who recognize that Western aggression, Western imperialism is probably the gravest threat facing humanity today. And every other threat to humanity stems from it, even the climate, that stems from the appalling consumerist pollution that the governments do not challenge, that continues unabated. So just issue after issue. We want to build a collective of not just journalists, not just content creators, but artists and everybody who wants to use their talents in any way to help build a really positive movement, in a sense, media collective, and that is kind of, you give what you get. Give according to ability and take according to necessity. So these are early days. We won't give too much away, and we'll try to keep some enigma over our future plans. But we have big future plans, and we're working on them a lot. And if you hear this, and if this clicks with you, and if you want to be here from the day one, which we're really at now, in terms of making all these plans, please get in touch. Please do get in touch, because everybody has talents. Everybody has a role to play in this. And we'd be delighted to have more people on board in the early stages while we're thinking big and drafting big as well. Is that all right? Seymour, sorry, I have to get used to your new name.
Dude, I
know. Yeah, will I jump into Palestine? So before I do, I'll just say, yeah, the format we've come up with now, this is a news kind of summary, but also kind of analysis and opinions, and then discussion when Dan will come in at the end. So we've broken it up into 3 segments of maybe the 3 most pressing stories in the world today, of course. So number 1, Palestine, number 2, Ukraine, and then number 3, we just kind of picked a more broad topic of mapping multipolarity and kind of China and Russia's role in leading the charge away from US hegemony, de-dollarization, BRICS, and things like this. And we have a few maps of the UN votes to help illustrate that the West really is becoming more isolated than it knows. And I remember I saw recently in a YouTube video from a Russian professor a very interesting statistic that only 6% of the world's children live in the West, in the Western countries, North America, Europe, what do they include? I think Australia, New Zealand. I think they even include Japan. But still, only 6% of the world's children today live in these countries. And all this aggressive sanctions policy that we're seeing, this vicious genocide they've enabled in Palestine, it's actually showing that the West really is becoming more isolated more quickly than we think, despite their kind of economic might. So will we jump into Palestine? Dan, if
Yeah,
that's okay, are you there?
let's do it. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep. Nice one. Okay.
But yeah, that is
Slug of water, guys. Sorry.
that is an interesting statistic, man. Only 6%.
Mm,
And
mm, mm,
I don't know. This is not really we've got more important things to talk about, but it is interesting,
mm.
to see that coupled with too like how much the West just absolutely despises children in the first place. It's like not only are we shrinking in like literal numbers or like relevance, and not in like a replacement theory way, but just more of like we're losing relevance on the global stage naturally, but we're also like our culture is sort of driving away our literal reproductive relevance too, as we just continue to sort of shrink away into nihilistic nothingness, which is
Malthusianism. Do you know Malthusian? What
absolutely,
Malthusian?
sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I think
sir.
that's still pervasive in the ruling classes. It really is, and they're maybe less open about it now. It's an absolutely ridiculous idea, by the way, because apparently Earth's population is going to peak. I think around the 2070s at about 9 billion, when China and India and a lot of Africa will be so developed that they'll have smaller families. So it's an absolute ridiculous idea that we need to cull the world's population to maintain resources enough for everybody, when the elites and the people that push these horrible Malthusian ideas in the think tank magazines and these and whatnot, they just want to get rid of poor people. Like, do you understand? And they just want to be able to
Exactly.
hoard more populations. Yeah, it's very bleak. Yeah. Will I start with Palestine, moving on to bleakness, I guess, at long last?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
From one to the next.
yeah. Okay, so I just have a Guardian article in front of me. Look, Guardian is MSN propaganda, but there seems to be a fairly honest breakdown, a 5 hours ago breakdown of the death toll in Gaza since the 7th of October. The massacres continues, guys. Okay, I've been following this every day. It's been breaking our hearts every day, and that's just, there's no other way to put this. The massacres continue. So 7th of October, what are we now? 5th. So this is coming up to day 27, I believe. We might be coming up to the 4th week now. Okay, guys. So this is how the Guardian summary just on the death toll reads. Okay. Death toll in Gaza since 7th of October rises to 9,770 Palestinians, including 4,008 children. It is reported that at least 9,770 Palestinians, including 4,008 children, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip since 7th of October. Reuters reports a new figure has been released by the spokesperson for the Hamas-run Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip. Israel has been bombarding Gaza since the 7th of October, when Hamas attacked inside its borders, which killed at least 1,400 Israelis. Debated how them 1,400 Israelis were killed, or if they were killed. There was no footage still released of mass massacres at that festival. But yeah, this is a MSM source. This is from The Guardian. In addition, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Israeli-occupied West Bank says that 152 Palestinians have been killed and 2,100 since the 7th of October. The claims have not been independently verified. I'd like to make just a differentiation here, guys, between the bombardment of Gaza, and a lot of people call it an open-air prison. It's an open-air concentration camp at this stage, guys, because huge numbers of them are being killed intentionally. And then the murder that's taking place in the West Bank. So the murder taking place in Gaza is from the sky. It's cowardly weapons. That's the vast amount of the civilian death. Let alone, we'll get into the fighting in a moment. But in the West Bank, guys, there's a vicious violence happening at the moment of Jewish settlers, mobs, just pure mobs, or maybe some kind of fascist militias fascist is the word for them. I know they don't like it, but there's no other word for them. And they're going around like just extrajudicially lynching, setting Palestinian kids on fire, and just in cold blood murdering. And that's how Israel has always functioned. Any settler in any area is fully entitled to murder Palestinian civilians. That's how it's been for 75 years, really. Just another statistic off the top of the head, guys. In the Nakba, when Israel declared their state in 1948, because Britain said they could, when they expelled 750,000 Palestinians, that was remembered as the tragedy, the nightmare in Palestine. So, guys, the numbers are even worse in 4 weeks in 2023, and so much so for this liberal development of morality. But yeah, so like even within Gaza, they displaced 1.1 million from the north to the south, and then they've been bombing all the schools, hospitals, mosques in the south anyway. Yeah, so as we all know, guys, the massacres are continuing. These are genocide numbers. There's not really any way in hell they're going to be able to kill completely off like a complete genocide on the full Palestinian people. That's obviously the nightmare scenario that everyone thinks they're watching in front of them. And that's bleak, but that's probably not going to happen. The international pressure has already turned against Israel. And I don't think they can get away with it. And we've seen changes in rhetoric from the US leadership, of course, who we know are behind this completely. And at the moment, there is some talk of a pause coming from Biden due to the massive anti-war pressure, the pro-Palestinian pressure in the US. And also probably with an eye on elections, knowing how unpopular this genocide campaign in Gaza is. Let me just look at my notes for a moment, guys. As these massacres continue, and guys, I don't like watching the footage of all the dead children, and I think anyone here that watches this, guys, just be careful with that you don't demoralize the Palestinian people, and that every corpse is a human being, it's someone's family member. Do they really want that plastered on your Instagram story? Do they really want that plastered all over the world? Just show dignity with that, guys. Just one thing to remember. Sorry, not to be preachy.
No, but that's a
Yeah.
great point, and just to quickly chime in,
Thanks, Daniel.
because we were in the middle of like we are watching this genocide unfold, and there is a certain amount of helplessness, right? You are watching one of the worst atrocities of modern times through your black screen, which you can then just kind of turn off and on at your leisure. There's also the reality that we're not actively involved, but we are somewhat complicit in that our standard of living and our day-to-day actually requires, let's be honest about that, it requires this kind of massacre and violence to sustain itself.
Because the West has no wealth of itself.
Exactly.
Do you understand?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, it can be rather demoralizing. Again, to, whether you're engaging with it or not, there's some version of you're almost staring at a mirror when you're watching these massacres unfold, because it's very revealing. You look back up from your screen and you're sitting in a Starbucks and you're like, well, what the fuck even is my reality compared to, and, because of what's going on. So, that being said, though, it is, I think, key for the West to try to continue feeling like they want to have an impact. Like there has been a tide shift where people are coming out of the woodwork who are honest people in the West, people with a moral conscience, people who see the bankruptcy of our own society and what we do abroad and want to do something productive. And I think that turning that helplessness into productivity is probably the best response you can possibly have. But keep making that as strategic as possible and be aware of the grifters. Because to your point, Tommy, the Sean Kings of the world are out here using brutal, horrific images from the massacre in Gaza. And while it may be, somewhat useful to at least get exposure to the base reality of what's going on, the people who are sharing this and the way that they frame it is often meant to emotionally suck any optimism and energy out of you so that you feel helpless. And they grift on it. They make their money off of it. They feed their donor class off of it. They feed their NGO class off of it. While we, helplessly stare at it, cry, think, what can we possibly do, donate to somewhere, feel like maybe we did something, and then slowly but surely lose hope and energy. So
Yep.
I think there is a role to play in sharing the realities of what's going on. I think sensitivity is key, but really it takes discernment to make sure that we're not feeding into the sort of grift layer of all of this, that it becomes more and more pervasive, and that we see represented in every community. There are white American grifters, black American grifters, Muslim American grifters, trying to frame what's going on in Gaza and present as, no, we're on the side of the Palestinians. But you'll notice they'll have a little something that'll eke through that's like a, guys, stop posting on your socials, you're gonna get caught. And it's like, okay, well, essentially now you're just demoralizing the West back into complicity, helplessness, and ignorance. So I'm all about trying to find that right balance of how we can engage with these horrors without reproducing them or naively just traumatizing people around us or ourselves for the for our own ego aggrandizement, essentially.
Yep, very well said. Very well said. And it's all about balance, isn't it? And there's nothing I find more reprehensible than people who go to protest to have a good time. Do you get me? And that's really common in my country. So, like, I was quite impressed. I was at the Palestine March last weekend. It was a great turnout. Ireland's heart is really with Palestine due to our anti-colonial history. Or sorry, our horrible history struggling under colonialism. But then protests, they can be quite triggering because people turn up, especially in Ireland, and they want to have a good time. Do you understand? And they want to sing song, and people quite often get pictures. That's been the trend of Irish protests I've ever gone to all throughout my young adult life, and I actually gave up on protesting altogether. What I would like to say the difference is about this Palestine, the attempted genocide on Palestine, is that the resistance explicitly actually asked like decent humanists from all over the world to come out onto the streets, especially in the Western capitals and the Western big cities, to put pressure and to draw attention to the supremacist genocidal nature of the Zionist state. And that's what they've asked us to do. So that's why I'm protesting now when I can. And sorry, in terms of like coping with all this, is that what you were kind of getting at, Seymour? Sorry. Yeah, so let me just add then, I think protesting is one thing we can do, okay? And I'm talking here now for the people in the know. We'll come back now and hopefully give more context for people looking just for updates and also for people looking to get some background to understand the situation. But for those of us who know what's happening, who see this genocide very clearly, and there's a lot of us, and that's probably the majority of my audience see it like that, like me, and have had a really like a difficult, just really hard to function last 3-4 weeks, knowing this, and especially in the smartphone era where we're seeing these images are right in front of us. I think you mentioned to me before, Seymour, and I agree that the strike on what was it, the Al Arab, the Baptist hospital on the 17th of
the
October.
Baptist hospital, yes.
Yeah, I'll never be the same after that. Do you understand? And that will stick with me for the rest of my life. You get me? And I'm not saying that it's a chip or it's taken away from me, but I mean that's going to be a motivating factor for the rest of my life. Seeing the absolute brutality in the face of the whole world, and just the sheer barbarism of supremacist, Western-enabled supremacist proxy terror. And that's a very technical term, but I can't think of another term to name it at the moment. If you get me, yeah. So sorry, guys. Going to protests as the brave Palestinian resistance asks, that's one duty we have, and one way actually of connecting with people around us and doing something positive through this awful, awful humanitarian catastrophe, if you can call it that. Let's just call it a genocide. Attempted genocide, because they're not going to kill them all. The resistance is doing too well. Another thing we can do, guys, is just a bit of internet hygiene. Not sharing Zionist propaganda. And when I say Zionist propaganda, I mean the whole Western mainstream media propaganda. In the stream from 3 weeks ago, I explained the origins of Zionism. I didn't explain it from the more literature academic point of view of these mad racists in the 1900s who wrote about their homeland and planted the idea. I looked at the more geopolitical origins of Zionism. And that is basically the British. Initially, were trying to get Jews out of Europe, put them in a homeland that they've recently colonized. Didn't give a shit about the native population, as the Brits never do. But when America took over British foreign policy after World War II, and I mean the American elites, the American deep state, I don't mean the people, their main objective for setting up Israel was to impede the Arab world and to get the resources out of that region back to the West, and to have a Western client proxy state completely dependent on US dollars and US weaponry. And that's there to impede and bring destruction right in the middle of the Arab world. So we've got to keep drawing attention to that. We've got to be loud about that. And just, guys, the people around you, initiate the conversations with your family, with your friends, people that want to know, and just talk about it, guys. And oppose genocide as much as we can throughout all this. Was there anything else we were going to add there, Dan? Sorry. Seymour.
No, brother, you're fine. Well, I mean, there's quite a lot to add. I mean, I'll follow up on your last point there, initiating conversations. I really think that what is unfolding today in Gaza and in Palestine is a pivotal, no turning back moment for a lot of things. I think it is
watershed.
Yep, watershed moment. I think it has revealed the absolute bankruptcy of Zionism and isn't real. I think it has. Hey, gotta keep it. Gotta keep it. A little levity here and there. Sorry, my cat is jumping all over my keyboard. Gotta love that. Yes, it's a watershed moment. It has revealed the bankruptcy of Zionism. It has revealed, the complicity of the West, and it has revealed a true grain of authenticity in people's hearts and in people who, we may have disagreements with on other subjects, especially stuff that in the West seems to dominate our perception of who is and isn't a righteous human being. Things like culture war issues, right?
Don't we know?
Oh, yeah. And instead, what this has done is it has refocused all of our attention into something that is almost inarguable, to the point where the folks that are still perpetuating the sort of would you hide me propaganda, all the way to everyone in Gaza is a terrorist, and everywhere, in that spectrum of Zionist propaganda, it has revealed who has the intuition to see that as bankrupt as it really is. And I think, for example, it's encouraging to see someone like my father, who is like 65 years old. He is, kind of like he's got some like Ron Paul libertarian vibes to him, right? And the Fed, right? Which, hey, that's we can work with that.
Yeah.
And the Fed is good. But folks where like I would disagree with my father on many things, many culture-related issues. There's things that I might identify and say, "Oof, God, that's a product of another time," and I gotta call that out and critique it. However, when it comes to something as black and white as the genocide of Gaza, it is creating inroads with people in our lives where we may have disagreed with them in the past. This is now an opportunity to open up conversation and bring them into a revolutionary mindset.
Big time.
There is no fucking reforming. There is no reforming Israel. There is no reforming the genocide in Gaza. There is no let's vote our way out of this. We are smashing our heads against a brick wall, and I think people are starting to wake the fuck up and realize that, which is excuse my language, sorry, but sometimes you just got to pound it, pound the point in. But like it not to say silver lining, but it is encouraging that at the very least, and God bless the people of Gaza, their martyrdom is so it's such a watershed moment that I don't think people with true like people who hold truth dear in their hearts cannot look away from this, and also cannot have an analysis of it that lets them go back to their day to day. And I think when we can identify those people in our lives who are already having their reaction, we need to use that opportunity. Us, revolutionary conscious folks, or folks who at
Seize the
least are.
moment. Seize the moment.
Yeah,
A lot of
exactly.
people that had been sheltered and kind of willfully sheltered by the liberal life of the liberal post-truth media and by the pseudo values in media, when they see the dying children in Gaza with the bombs made in the West, with the vicious, lazy justifications by genocide and Joe, with the vicious statements coming out from Netanyahu, the vicious statements coming out from his defense minister Yoav Gallant, I might have mentioned, sorry, there was a minister that called for nuking Gaza there today. In fairness, they rebuked him, but still, like this awful genocidal language. It's just right. People can't avoid it anymore. They can't. They can't. They can't. Especially in the smartphone era, and there's an opportunity in that. Now, look, that's not to say clap, clap. This is the best thing ever. A load of people are dying and people are waking up. No, there's a duality of all this. And the truth is that history was always like these histories of struggle against occupation, against eventual genocide. They're always like there's a duality to all of them in that like it's stories of great evil that we can see the evil of the viciousness of the bombing of Gaza Strip, but also on the flip side, there's stories of great heroism. You know what I mean? At the same time, and like the Palestinians are showing us like such they're showing us what it means to be human. And I don't know, maybe Seymour, you saw this quote yesterday on Instagram, but it was a beautiful quote saying that if in the last few weeks you've come closer to your truth or your Lord, if you've decided to forgive people that have done wrong with you, and if you've found closer to yourself more than all, it's not actually you that's saving Palestine; it's Palestine that's saving us. And that's what I'm feeling, kind of. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
mm,
I saw I saw something similar
mm.
and agree. And it's almost it's something that I totally agree with, and yet it kind of feels like it's got a duality to it, right? Everything is dual always, and it's both
Yeah.
that, and it's also man, it's like even having the capacity to say something like that feels like a little icky to me, because it's like, wow, like the people of Gaza who are being massacred in real time are, saving us and giving us clarity. It's like they didn't ask to give us this clarity, they didn't ask to be at the
Mm,
butt end of, waking up the Western world to their own atrocities. It's just
mm, mm,
it can
mm.
be as
It's awfully
disheartening.
tragic.
Exactly, it can
No,
be
I
as
hear you too. Yeah,
disheartening as
yeah,
it
yeah,
is inspirational. It's pretty
yeah,
horrific.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's no escaping it. Yeah, you have to believe that the victory will come, and you have to believe that the human spirit overcomes it all. Do you understand? And they're probably the main carriers of the human spirit in a very dark era of history. Let's be honest. Because this is the most vivid and the numbers wise, this is the most bloody genocidal campaign of the 21st century. But there were many other attempted genocides that were brushed under the rug. The bombing of Donbass from 2014 to 2022, the vicious proxy war the West launched on Syria, that really was almost a genocide campaign against many non-Sunni Muslims in Syria and Iraq, the Yazidis, and the Alawites. There was just mass murder happening, and this is the world I've always known. And this is the world system, let alone the exploitation of Africa and the global South and the deaths through poverty alone. Um, but this has been the one that the people that aren't as maybe politically obsessed as us can't avoid, and that's the opportunity in that is that people like us that have a sense of this world system, we need to be able to express it and to give people that read scared people that it's not their fault they're born in the West. It's not their fault all their media is absolute dog shit propaganda. Excuse my language now. But yeah, that's the opportunity for people like us. These people want answers right now. We don't have all the answers. I don't claim to be a scholarly genius, but I've been, reading on this anti-imperialist history, this history of struggle, and I want to be able to guide these people through these things. That it's not, the world has always been a tough fucking place, and the elites, and there's always been very dark chapters in history, in most countries' histories. But at the same time, the human spirit prevails, and it'll be no different now with Palestine. And actually, resistance was lacking this century, and it was a very dangerous situation with the Americans making step after step, and the Palestinians keeping their resistance alive was extremely brave. Will I jump into just a quick look at the military map now, just on that note, maybe?
Yeah, I was about
Yeah,
to
yeah,
say we have
yeah,
some
yeah.
visuals, including a clip of
High tech. Yeah,
the brave Palestinian resistance fighters out in the field. I
yeah,
mean, with heroics that you didn't think you'd see except in like a fucking COD video game. Like we're talking real heroics. From the Palestinian resistance. So yeah, Tommy, if you want to cue us up, I can pull up the visuals, and then I'd love to
thank you
follow up
very
with
much.
that on some more propaganda debunking around the resistance. I think that's really important
Yep,
to find some clarity
yep,
on how we should be discussing said resistance. So yeah, go ahead.
yep. Really nice. Okay. Excuse me, excuse me more. And look at the front. Do you have that map of Gaza there? Sorry, I'm not able to get it up. Are you able to get that up? That one, Dan. Sorry. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks a million. Okay, so I can't see that extremely clearly. Let me get it on my own laptop. Okay, so I don't have military statistics in front of me because I am disorganized and I'm having laptop problems at the moment. Okay, but as we can see here on this map of Gaza, this is from the Live UA map sources, which is a pro-Western source. But I used it because they're pretty up to date and they've got a pretty big budget, it must seem, because they give up to date maps, like live up to date maps of the Ukraine conflict and now the Israel Palestinian conflict as well. So as we can see here, we're looking at northern Gaza, and the areas in blue are where the IDF now are infiltrating. I won't say control because they're just there. They're not there with any security. In the north of Gaza, as you can see there at the border, that's mostly farmland and a little bit of beach. I don't know if anybody's seen great footage. There's been about 3 scuba diver attacks from the Palestinian resistance, where they go in with really long oxygen tanks, and then they appear on the beach of the IDF soldiers, and just all sorts of bravery in the resistance fighting. So the most recent figure I saw, I think, is that Israel is admitting about, I think, 340 something deaths at this stage. I know Hezbollah claimed 120 deaths before Nasrallah's speech when they, 120 killed IDF soldiers before he delivered his speech. And we're seeing incredible footage of the resistance from Palestine. So at the moment, it's hard to know what Israel's end goal here is in Gaza. It definitely seems like they're trying to take the north, push them all down into the south, then hopefully maybe push them into Sinai. But Egypt has been very equivocal that they're not going to take the 2 million Palestinians into Sinai. So the vicious massacres continue, but the fighting on the ground is not going very well with them. So Hamas claimed, I think they got 24 tanks, 24 vehicles, enemy vehicles in the last 24 hours, which, guys, is really phenomenal. Like, it's probably the most successful guerrilla warfare campaign that we've ever seen in the 21st century. It is absolutely phenomenal. And do you have that footage? Is that okay to play now? Yeah, just to show
Yeah.
you what these fighters are like, how brave they are. And let's just, to add context just first, I'll just say, like, there's only 25,000 of the active, I think, Palestinian resistance in Gaza right now. They're facing a military, I think, of at least 150,000 went in, where they're there at the border waiting to go in, let alone the warplanes and the US JDAM bombs and the white phosphorus bombs and all the technological superiority they have in front of them. But it just goes to show, even in 2023, bravery and moral conviction really are the most effective weapons in war. And I think this is a clip that proves that. So if you want to play that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you, Seymour.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks that are in the know, they may have already seen this clip. It was going viral
A
here in
lot
the
of us have,
community.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
guess.
No harm to see it
But
again, though. Yeah,
nope,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Let's go ahead and cut it
Yeah,
on here.
yeah.
مسدة ومن خلفهم سدة فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون.
We're there?
All right, we're back. Yeah, sorry, folks. I'm still getting used to how to run this shit on the back
We're back,
end.
we're back, we're back.
But yeah, wow. I mean, holy shit.
No worries.
When you compare that,
Did that play smoothly?
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it did on my end. But
Nice,
did you
nice,
see it
nice.
okay on
Probably
your
it
end?
did. Yeah, perfect, perfect. Yeah,
All right, great.
it was a bit, yeah, but that's probably my terrible phone anyway. But continue, sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just gonna say. I mean, when you compare that level of bravery, heroism, I mean, where you have an individual soldier praying to God and exalting God as they run up to a tank one-on-one, plant an explosive, jump back into the brush, blow up the tank, whip out their RPG, blast the thing to all hell, and then get back
Yep.
into their man-made tunnels. When you compare that to the fucking TikTok army that they're up against,
Oh my god, oh my god.
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
why I have full confidence in the Islamic resistance, the Palestinian resistance, and the larger axis of resistance in facing the West as we continue to decay. Because again, I think Israel today is a mirror to the West. Israel is almost, they are speed running the West, right? In 75 years, they've both built up, colonized, gotten to sort of Western strength, power, as we're kind of used to seeing, the sort of dismal, we'll never be able to defeat them type of nihilism. Now we're seeing the decay, the late stage era of Israel in real time. And I think, again, it's a chance for reflection for the West. Because, oh God, that is likely, the reality of, like, if anyone in the West thinks, oh, we're like, we're so strong, those baddies are never gonna stop us. I mean, fools, delusional fools, because
I know.
there's no real the heart of the Palestinian people and the resistance is just unmatched, and I can't help but draw inspiration spiritually and strategically from what they're doing. So, man, I mean, that clip just kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of clips like this coming out at the moment, like literally point blank. And I saw one there recently, just literally 10 meters behind the wall. They shoot. They put the internally explosive device on the tank, and then they shoot it. And like as they're approaching the tank, the turrets of the machine gun on top of the tank is turning towards them. But they're there. They're saying their prayers, and they get the job done, and they blow up these Merkava tanks, which for so long the Israelis had in their propaganda had portrayed as invincible and all this bullshit. But nothing's invincible against the resilience of the human will. And that is a lesson in history, and that many times it's come up in history, but I think we all needed to hear it in the 21st century, and the Palestinians have shot that through us since October 7th with the Al-Aqsa flood operation. It's been quite phenomenal. That said, the human suffering is insane that the Israelis are willing to inflict. Yeah, and I don't know if you follow Resistance News Network. Did I put you onto them on Telegram?
I really just kind of started getting into Telegram,
Yeah,
so don't rely on
yeah.
me too much for commentary. I'm
Don't
afraid.
worry, yeah. So they're great guys. Resistance News Network, I think they represent one of actually the communist factions in the Palestinian resistance at the moment. But they give great updates, and they actually have an Instagram page as well. And they shared some great literature, just very broad war advice written by one of their leaders that was, I think, martyred in 2017. But they were planning. They knew how drunk on supremacism and genocidal ideas of Zionism and backing by the West. They knew that Netanyahu's government and the Israeli state thinks like this. Do you understand? Now, it's very hard for us to understand the idea of sacrifice on this level, but this really does seem like a collective decision that the Palestinians, not Hamas on behalf of Palestine, but it really seemed the whole common Palestinian resistance said we're going to fight for our people. And in every footage you see, in the people getting the bodies out of the rubble, anytime anybody's ever asked, the Gazans are with the resistance, and they've chosen resistance. And yeah, it's just absolutely phenomenal. Will we move on just to the regional actors beyond?
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, yeah,
no, go ahead. I mean, briefly, I kind of wanted to follow up after
yeah.
seeing the resistance in action with just some useful analysis, or hopefully
Thank you.
just
Yeah,
my
please do.
thoughts
Yeah,
on the propaganda surrounding how we should be talking about and making sense of the resistance today.
yeah, indeed.
I'm curious if you have any initial thoughts, because I have some as well, Tommy. But based on what you've been seeing in terms of how, oh man, it's almost like the eggshell walking that folks in the West we feel we need to do to somehow communicate. We have, we support the Palestinian people, but we're not anti-Semitic, I promise. It's like that sort of distorted eggshell approach to having to show solidarity with a resistance movement, I think it can be very demoralizing for people. Have you seen that in your either online circles or your more sort of regional Irish circles?
More in my regional Irish circles, because you might know I keep my online circles quite tight, and I have a very
That's
long
fair.
block list. But yes, I do. Well, you see, yeah, because the media narrative is set by the U.S. government, and every single Western country follows that media narrative. It operates as what's the word, a single unit basically, with this propaganda. So as it says, they'll report, oh, Israelis killed, and then they'll report Hamas says Palestinians killed. Do you understand? And this conflict is a lot more dramatic than the recent rounds of conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But all of them have horrible death ratios of 20-1, Palestinians to Israelis. And of course, that's how it always is in a guerrilla war of liberation, because you're fighting usually an empire. So sorry, was your question more specifically over what's take? So yeah, with these people. So look, I'm just unapologetically for the resistance. For the people that fight against genocide, they are the good guys, like hands down. You watch Brian Berletich as well, don't you?
Yes, New Atlas.
Yeah,
Definitely
I have
recommend, folks.
definitely recommend too. I have infinite respect for him, and the way he's covered the Ukraine war has been absolutely genius. During this round of conflict, he's getting very caught up on Hamas's past from about 10 years ago, when Hamas actually kind of somewhat joined the Arab Spring, not fully, but somewhat supported the Arab Spring regime change operation of the West, which caused a whole lot of misery, especially in Syria and Libya. And because of that, Brian Berletich is quite suspicious that Hamas was put up to October 7th to invite the destruction by the Israelis, that they might be double agents. But that's not the case at all, guys. And then Nasrallah's speech, he said indeed it was 100% a Palestinian operation on October 7th. And we guys, like, whatever with the 75 years of, the constant settlements, the constant brutalization, in the last 3 years, 2 years alone, they started raiding that Al-Aqsa mosque. They shot that journalist in the head, Shireen Abu Akleh. There was a lot of, and also the normalization process happening between the Saudis and some other Arab regimes in the region normalizing ties with Israel, made actually, in hindsight, the October 7th assault by the Palestinian resistance an absolute necessity. Now, the Western propaganda will say, "Oh, they're as bad as each other. They took hostages." I don't have this statistic in front of me, but like Israel has thousands of Palestinian hostages not on trial. You understand? Hamas was completely entitled to go to that festival, ignorantly placed beside them in that desperate situation, the open air concentration camp in Hamas. They decided to have their trans creepy festival right beside it. It is a shame a lot of people died, of course, but like this is the conflict, and you can never equate the people trying to liberate themselves, trying to combat genocide, to the actions of the genociders, the occupation states. It just can't be equated, really, can it?
No,
Yeah. So
I agree.
my message is support the resistance, no matter what they look like. And what I wanted to say is that actually, in the last couple of years, Hamas reopened relationships with Syria and made big strides into getting along with the axis of resistance. So that showed that they completely left the US collusion role. That's history, especially since Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. I think the whole Palestinian resistance knew by then that they're not getting any concessions, that America is not ever going to be a equitable player in bringing any type of conclusion to this. You know, they've been betrayed so many times. Do you understand? So resistance was their last option, and they've chosen and done it. And resistance against genocide on your homeland is a sacred duty. And whether it's Islamist political groups fighting, whether it's communists, whether it's pure nationalists, any of them fighting are entitled to fight and should be supported. Because they're fighting for something like really against a real pure evil, and they're fighting against the odds as well. So it's an epic. It's an epic of struggle, and for history geeks like me, will know that like history is full of these epics of struggle against the odds and of sacrificial men, sacrificial generations, sacrificial societies, thinking of the bigger picture. So yeah, just in terms of what approach to take to the resistance, just don't engage. Don't let people set the narrative. Do you condemn Hamas, or what do you think? You know, don't let anyone ever explain what's happened since October 7th in a vacuum. You know, like I think something like the 2022 was the most murderous year on record in the West Bank for settlers killing Palestinians. Usually, mostly seems to be children as well. So yeah, guys, the resistance are brave. The resistance are the future. We had a 1916 rebellion here that was absolutely crushed, that brought huge human suffering onto the population, and we remember them as the forefathers of our country, as the heroes today. Do you understand? So my honest opinion is resistance is always worth it. And I think, as we hinted at the start, our kind of philosophy for this media collective is that like Western imperialism, Western hegemony, Western militarism is the main threat to humanity's existence on Earth, to peace and prosperity on Earth at the moment. And so, following on from that, whoever resists that, no matter where they are, no matter what heckin' ideals they follow, if they're resisting the bad guys, putting their lives on the line, putting their people on the line, they deserve nothing but absolute respect and admiration. And it's a bit of a challenge for those of us in the know at the moment to help introduce these resistance factors. If you look at Hamas's charter, do you know what they want? They want 1967 borders. The 1967 borders aren't, for me, just enough for Palestinians. It's a slightly expanded Gaza. It's a slightly more secure West Bank, less Israeli control on the West Bank. But still, that's a country split in two by an illegitimate occupier state sent there by the West. So yeah, I'm fully believing river to the sea, and I think Israeli brutality has actually made any type of two-state solution or coexistence impossible. But sorry, I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, Seymour.
No, that's great,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
I totally agree with you. And my follow up commentary to that is really more about, um, you know, I think it can be difficult sometimes for, the sort of unattuned Western audience to understand how to wield their compassion or empathy, because to give some grace. The U.S. is probably the most propagandized. I mean, maybe behind Israel, from what we've seen, but maybe the most propagandized country on earth. Our perception of reality, our perception of who the honest and dishonest actors are, what humanity and support of humanity and sort of like being a humanist looks like, is just so distorted from the rest of the world. And so with that in mind, especially because the U.S. is subject to a lot, probably the most Zionist propaganda out there, other than Israel itself, there is a lot of hesitancy around being bold with support for Palestinian resistance out of fear of being perceived as, branded as, or ran out of your job or social lives as an anti-Semite. And so people come up with, there's... Oh, no, go ahead.
No. Please continue. Sorry.
Okay, well, I was going to say there's, and I think some of that is sort of, well, no, okay. What I'm really trying to say is that blind kind of compassion that equates all... I mean, it feels weird to say, but that equates all human lives as equal. I mean, that's not really what I'm trying to say. That some are more equal than others, bullshit, anything like that. But more that you can perceive geopolitical conflict and loss through the same lens, sort of blindly wherever you look, is just not a realistic way to gauge where we are as a world, and it doesn't acknowledge the reality that you just offered, Tommy, which is the correct analysis of our historical material reality, that there is a chief, unipolar, hegemonic ruler on Earth today. It is the United States, and it is the United States Western proxies. And if that is not understood, first and foremost, everything else is going to be distorted and misunderstood, unfortunately. And so that's where I feel like my chief focus is really hoping that we can communicate that to people and help them understand, because without that, there can be distortions that, I can sympathize with the attempts that people are having to sort of try to humanize, or offer a humanistic perspective to their peers, but that in effect only delegitimizes the resistance and enables Zionist propaganda. So I want to highlight one big one here, which is the sort of people aren't their governments attitude, right? Hamas is, the Palestinians aren't Hamas. Hamas is a government, but like we all know, governments don't represent their people. Governments are bad, and often they're corrupted with power, and so the actions of governments don't represent their people. And so they use that almost as a comparison to say Hamas does not equal Palestine, just like the U.S. government doesn't equal its people. And I think that is an unfortunately insidious perspective that I don't think is always offered with a maliciousness in mind, but I want to try to offer weigh what is really being said there, trying to draw comparisons between the defunct criminal nature of the U.S. government and its separation from the people of the U.S., and trying to compare that with Hamas and the Palestinian people in order to humanize Palestinian people. I find that not only strategically useless, as it equates Hamas with the criminal chief imperial power in the world, which is just on its face, you can't make that connection, but I think it's a poor comparison objectively. Obviously, a resistance political party and militia that rises from the Palestinian people under occupation, that is staffed with, I think I saw... Abu Ubaida's the spokesman for Hamas. I think he made a claim in one of his speeches where he was something like 85% of our fighters are orphans. They lost their family by the Israelis. That context is key. So that reality is incomparable to the masses of the West, right? Also, whereas
it's awful.
Well, and here last point. Also, whereas we in the West strategically want to distance ourselves from our government for the sake of raising political consciousness in the West, that is a strategic, right? Even if we can accept a certain amount of our lifestyle is bred on complicity of these atrocities, to build revolutionary consciousness, we have to at least wake up the people to say, is that what you want to be associated with? Do you want a $14+ billion package of aid to Israel right now to keep massacring people, right? So whereas we want to distance ourselves from our government for that strategic nature, Palestinians need no such narrative guidance, right? They are materially, they aren't materially separated from their resistance. They are their resistance. So trying to draw this sort of, they're not their government, is just it's a Western way. It's a Western nation state way of viewing a anti-colonial resistance movement, and it's just doesn't have any objective utility. And two, go ahead.
No, too, please. I'm interested. Please, yeah. No, I was just going to add on to what you're saying, so please.
Yeah, well, I mean, last point then is that, how much grace we as U.S. citizens or Westerners deserve as complicit or, as ignorant as we've been to the crimes of our government isn't always even for us to decide, right? But rather those who are at the receiving end of our government's crimes, they are the ones who get to determine to some degree how much grace they want to offer back our way. And therefore, it is imperative for us to be forward-thinking about that. I mean, for example, we saw this recently at the Dagestan airport in Russia. The people of Russia there was an Israeli civilian plane landing there. And the Muslim majority people of Dagestan in Russia responded by saying, fuck that plane. And they stormed the airport and the landing pad to essentially express, get the fuck out of our country. It ended up not, I think, being like even being like majority Israeli citizens, or maybe it was like a majority like Muslims from Israel coming. Regardless, I think there was some misunderstanding. But I think the point stands. the point stands in that that is now being used by Zionist propagandists to say, look at the insatiable anti-Semitism of the Slavic hordes and of, the Western leftists. They're all the same.
Do you know, actually, it was actually Ukrainian intelligence services that actually were behind that. So they had this Telegram channel. They operate Telegram channels in every big city in Russia. So I think Makachalaka is the capital of Dagestan. And they admitted to it. This Ukrainian ex-Russian, through way of citizenship, switched over to the dark side. He's a Ukrainian secret services guy now. But he admitted he runs this channel, Dagestan, Good Morning Dagestan. And they spread this rumor that a bunch of Israelis coming over. And indeed, I think it was actually Russian Jews. It could have been Caucasus Jews from the mountains who were in Israel for some reason coming back. Yeah. But actually, no, they spread this, go to the airport, storm the airport. And the Ukrainian intelligence services' sneaky little goal is to kind of get race riots in Russia.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much to set off a powder keg there in the Caucasus. Do you know what I mean? There's a vicious war there as recently as the late 90s. So so when it comes to Russia, when it comes to Russia, there's always a foreign hand poking itself in there because it's awful. But there's so much of the Western world is betting on Russia's collapse and strife and all this. It's awful. Yeah, but
I don't bring that up to undermine Russia or to try to paint the Russian people in a reactionary light. More to say that almost that the crimes of the West and of Israel and the U.S. empire's proxies are gonna have negative repercussions on people. Regardless of people are going to start catching strays essentially, and that is going to be used to heighten Zionist propaganda. But I think we need to be savvy enough to be able to not only detect and be conscious of that kind of, these sort of moments of passionate flare-ups from the people that aren't always as strategically refined, often are being agitated by dishonest actors. That's very key to think about.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
also
yeah.
that
Especially,
that we again, I'm trying to make a point to counter some propaganda I see here in the West, which, there are a lot of Western Jewish people, American Jews that are sort of, I see reposting in my circles, like ex high school, ex collegiate circles, and it's shit like, would you hide me? If things got bad, would you hide me? And it's this sort of like self-victimization of, oh my God, look, our plane landed in Russia and those Russians wanted to break in and kill every single one of us. Would you hide me? And we need to be incredibly cautious to not let that crocodile tears propaganda make us hesitant or refrain from speaking boldly on supporting the resistance, on supporting anti-imperialist movements, right? And be able to critically stand up for what are we even seeing happening, and help rationalize for people. Don't you think there might be some level of antagonism between a majority Muslim population in one of the leading anti-imperialist countries today, knowing that a plane of, kind of,
oh
not
yeah,
to
yeah,
like,
yeah. Of course, of course.
the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fat and happy
yeah, yeah,
pampered masses of Israel coming and landing here in Russia. We
yeah,
want
yeah,
them to know that we don't agree with what they're doing, and they need to hear
yeah.
that we are upset. And it's like that. We need to be able to rationalize that and make sense of that, so that we don't allow moments where we feel like, oh no, like, are we supporting anti-Semitism right now? No, you're not supporting anti-Semitism. That's obviously not what's happening here. It's not like this is suddenly showing everyone hates Jewish people, but rather Zionism is the chief enemy of Jewish people, because Zionism is using Judaism as almost a front-facing buffer to critique against its political project, and diaspora Jews will face, they will be the first ones likely to face some critique and antagonism from the rightfully upset masses of the Muslim, anti-imperialist, and non-Western world. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah, we just need to have
And
more clarity and strategic clarity of
yeah,
aiming those critiques back at where they're deserved, which is at
indeed,
Zionism and
indeed.
at Israel specifically, and at the United
Yeah,
States, not at
yeah.
chastising now, the Russian Muslims are so aggressive and mean. Look what they did, right? Like, we cannot waste our time with that kind of thing.
Like, I'm not even Muslim. Do you know what I mean? And I've been emotionally heightened by all this. Like, I'm outraged every day. Like, do you know what I mean? And it's been maybe the longest 3-4 weeks of my life. So like, absolute empathy with them guys that turned up at that airport, but they were misled by the top, and that's why it wasn't even Israelis on the plane. But yeah,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
this dehumanization of them, oh, vicious, looking for Jews, and a lot of Instagram, a lot of usually nice bloggers were kind of quite critical, and a lot of people love just giving shit on Russia. Russia's had a really tall order, guys, since the last 30 years. Do you mean? And they've done quite well amongst it all. And there's a lot of people betting on Russia's collapse all the time and rooting for it. But I thought, look, it didn't surprise me when there was a Ukrainian intelligence hand in it. But like, the men that turned up at that airport that day, I don't see them as, I see them as human beings, desperately angry human beings, because we all are, because we're all seeing the dead children, and we're all seeing this happen in front of our eyes, and with the vicious justifications. And let's be honest, like, every poll I see, the majority of the Israeli population is not concerned about Palestinian welfare at the moment, is not concerned. And you see the horrible footage close to the Gaza border of everybody clapping. So yeah, criticism where criticism is deserved, and that's at the state of Israel, the Zionists in control of it, but also the population that's enabled it. You understand? And there's great anti-Zionist Jews, there's great anti-Zionist Israelis, but I think it's come to the stage now where, whatever, I think maybe around 1900 to 1920, there might have been less than 10,000 Jews who lived very peacefully, by all accounts, in Palestine, and side by side type thing, babysitting each other's children. that's gone now due to this, especially this last round of brutality and massacres. Do you know what I mean? I don't think there's any really place for state of Israel left or for peaceful coexistence, and that's the bed they made for themselves through
Yep.
vicious murder.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Tommy,
Tough
hey,
though.
I've got to bounce here in about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna let you
That's
kind of
okay, man.
lead here on the next few things that we want to hit on.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just go on to Ukraine very quickly, will we?
Yeah, go
Look,
ahead,
I've
man.
missed the axis of resistance. Okay, let me just say about the axis of resistance. Okay, a lot of cowardly, bought out proxy states in the region, be it Muslim or be it Muslim, Arabic, or Turkish. They've let Palestine down, like they've always let Palestine down, and they've always shed crocodile tears for Palestine. So very quickly, I'll just say Turkey. Erdogan's making some very grandiose anti-imperialist statements, but his little satellite state, Azerbaijan, is a key pillar in Israel's energy policy, just like Israel was a key pillar in Azerbaijan's territorial expansionist campaign in Nagorno-Karabakh. So they're enabling them, and Erdogan hasn't kicked out the Israeli ambassador or cancelled ties, let alone has he left NATO. You know, this is a US orchestrated genocide on the Muslim people there, not so far from Turkey. He claims he's all for them, but he hasn't left NATO. He hasn't kicked out the ambassador. That's betrayal for me. Egypt, you could argue, are trying to do their best, but they're not getting a lot through that border. Some aid is getting through that border, but not a lot. You understand? And they could have been a lot more forceful about getting aid through that border. And apparently they're denying a lot of humanitarian convoys from getting through. And they're just kind of, for lack of a better term, bitching it because Israel says they'll bomb them if they come too close. And that's a damn shame because I believe Egypt is a population of 100 million people. These are Arab people. The people in Gaza are right there beside them. There are people right there beside them. So to watch this genocide continue, it seems quite cowardly. Saudi Arabia shooting down the Houthi missiles, the very brave Ansar Allah in Yemen, sending missiles to help their Palestinian brothers and sisters. And the horribly reactionary, backwards Saudi Arabian criminal regime are shooting down those missiles on behalf of the Western overlords before they reach Israel. That's how committed they are to liberating Palestine. Probably the most shameful of all is the UAE, who's delivering cargo planes, like big cargo planes, something like 10 in the last few weeks, to Israel. I'm not sure if it's weapons or just some supplies that they need, but they're actively supplying this genocide campaign of Israel, which is appalling for an Arab state. So what did I say? The UAE, as just Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. That's the main four I covered, because these aren't the axis of resistance. The axis of resistance is a term that emerged over the last 10, 20 years of the resistance to Western and Zionist imperialism in the region, the active resistance that never stopped fighting. So that includes the Palestinian resistance. It includes the Islamic resistance in Iraq, which is mainly Iranian-funded militias. It includes Iran as the bankroller and weapons provider of the whole operation. And it also includes Syria. Now, Syria has taken an awful beating from one of the most vicious international proxy terrorist wars launched by the West on Syria. But they're still shedding, they're still bravely shedding Israel from the occupied Golan Heights, that's occupied Syrian land. We have the Houthis, as I mentioned, Ansar Allah, extremely bravely sending drones, sending missiles, promising to increase their attacks out of just pure solidarity with their Palestinian brothers and sisters. And that's really, really admirable. Onto Yemeni, Iraq, Syria. Iran's diplomacy, guys, it has to be a lot safer for that. Meeting the heads of the resistance, warning America that they were not going to follow their dictates, that if Israel unilaterally escalates and continues this massacre, they will get involved and the conflict will escalate. And then, of course, the wonderful Hezbollah, the fighters who beat Israel in the 2000s, the first time to defeat them on the ground. They have 100,000 fighting men. The Shia culture, I believe the Shia religion has a lot to do with sacrifice, and that what makes them such brilliantly effective fighters. So they've taken the fight to Israel since October 8th in solidarity with their Palestinian brothers and sisters. And the most recent, I think the day before Nasrallah's speech on Friday, they released total IOF losses. And one of the figures that stuck out for me was 120 soldiers. So that's not bad. That's not bad at all. And they've lost only 57 themselves. Of course, you have to take all these casualty numbers from official sources with a pinch of salt. But they're doing well. And I think today they launched the first air-to-ground missile strike. So it's escalating slightly more. And the key takes from Nasrallah's speech, nothing too explosive that we didn't expect. He did say that it was 100% a Palestinian operation. I might have mentioned that before. He said that it's up to Israel how far this goes. And he made a very profound quote saying that, oh, and there's everybody on an airport, on an airplane from Doha to Qatar, and just showing how the whole world was encapsulated, the whole Muslim world at least was encapsulated by this man's speech. But he said that they're not going to launch all-out war, and that the key to victory in the long term is perseverance, not escalation. And the time for the total removal of the Zion Nazi state might not be just yet, because as it happens, they're a nuclear armed state, and the West has shown nothing. They've shown no limitations on the brutality of what they'll enable Israel to do. Do you understand? Even use those nuclear weapons. So they've got to be cautious.
Real quick, let's call out that actually took a very material turn. And the Israeli Minister of Heritage, Amishai Eliyahu, just recently said, I think it was yesterday, that one of the possible options for Israel is nuking the Gaza Strip right now. He said that as an official standing member of the Israeli government, said, yeah, we might nuke them. So we are in that reality. You are very right. And calculated resistance is going to be key. And that's not to say that the people of the Muslim world can't, and the Arab world can't keep pressuring their governments to action. We see that the people in Jordan, Egypt, are ready to push through the borders into Gaza. I mean, people want to take up arms and support their people.
Yep.
So, you know, I think there is diplomatic, honor and strategy that's worth applauding from the leaders of the Islamic world. But I am curious to see, as the aggression continues, how the people of those countries will continue to put pressure on their leaders to act differently or whatnot, to get more involved or to not, etc.
That was probably one of the major successes of the Al-Aqsa flood offensive by the Palestinian resistance, in that, number one, the absolute criminals that were collaborating and normalizing with the Israelis, that's destroyed now. They can't do that. The Saudi king can't sign a deal with Israel and look at his own people and face up to his own people again. So they've destroyed the normalization process. They're also putting massive pressure on these reactionary regimes. You know, the Hashemite monarchy in Jordan, or the Hussein monarchy. All these backward regimes that are client regimes of the United States, they're facing massive pressure from their own people, because the Arab people really, I believe, are maybe one people, but one civilization, and they really do care about each other, just like the whole Muslim world cares about each other, just like humanists everywhere care about each other. But on a more local, regional level, they really do care. And the final solution to this would be total Arab unity, axis of resistance unity, Iran there included, to get rid of the cancer. And it's moving towards that. It is moving towards that. And it's very tough history to fathom. It's a very tough history to fathom. Now, Dan, you've got to go, and I've no technological ability myself. Would you mind if we just wrap it up, maybe? And I'll leave Ukraine and multipolarity mapping for the next...
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Let's touch on that for next week. And for next week, everyone, I will have my schedule cleared out so that we will have a solid 2 hours now moving forward. So I'll be able to go 11 to 1.
You're too good. You're too good.
Brother, there's too much we need to speak on, and too many perspectives and analysis we need to try to offer up and synthesize. So
before you go, did we have a chat? Did we have a chat? That's any questions I might answer as you go? We didn't, did we? Maybe I didn't enable one.
I don't believe.
No, just no questions.
No, it's all good. Hey, man, we're just spitting nothing but fucking truth and facts, man. Everyone's got it. No questions needed. But no.
Okay, you go now. I'll just do a little blurb to finish up, and maybe just make a few points what I was going to say in Ukraine, and then I'll just click X myself. I don't need the clips anymore. Don't worry. Thank you very much.
No, you're good. And folks, I've got at the bottom there a running ticker. We've got our Instagrams. Make sure that you're following both of us, as we will continue to clip this up, repost, and obviously go live weekly with more analysis. And please, I would love, and I think the mission will continue to be achieved if not only more people with artistic talents, creative media talents, have a desire to get involved and participate, but also share these kinds of streams with people in your life who are well-meaning, but perhaps haven't had an accessible, refreshing analysis on how they, as Westerners, can begin to engage with the sort of breakdown of the West and the entrance into a new multipolar world.
Yeah.
The
What's
more
our
we can get
role
this
in
front
it?
of those folks, exactly.
What's our role in it? And we're figuring it out together. Do you know what I mean? And we will figure it out together. Yeah. Seymour, I'll let you go. Do your thing. Thank you so much. And thank God for Seymour's beautiful voice as well. Oh my God. Yeah. So I look forward
Thank
to your
you, brother.
interview for the next one. So yeah.
Man.
Have a nice night or
Can't wait
evening
for
where
it.
you are, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us live. We really appreciate it, and we'll be back consistently with more of this. And this is just the beginning. We have so much more to come.
Yeah.
Our streams will continue to get more structured. There will be more content to offer. So, get involved with us, folks. Oh, Geographer, thank you. You did say to ask a question, lol. We were just listening and enjoying the discussion. Thank you, Geographer. We really appreciate you tuning in, man, or whoever. And fuck, I gotta be conscious on that one. Thank you so much. Everyone's brother to me. Thank you, brother. We really appreciate you.
Me too.
And, and thank you so much for tuning along. So we'll have much more to come. Tommy, so grateful for this. Can't wait to see where we continue to take this. And folks, again, this is going to take all of us. This is going to take. If you see the truth in your heart, seize it, move forward actionably and strategically, and find a way to play your part, the more we can get the people of the West attuned with reality, the hopefully more mitigated we can, create that future where, as our quality of life and things will begin to deteriorate in the near future. I think massive inflation is on the horizon. We didn't even get to touch on some of the economic layers of this with the Ben Gurion Canal that Israel's wanting to build through Gaza, with the potential of Iran, as the U.S. escalates, blocking things like oil and energy shipments to the U.S. When gas is $10 a gallon in the United States, how are people in your life going to respond? That is how we need to be thinking about our role in the info war, what we can help provide for people, the clarity we can give people, so that when those moments come, we aren't pushed into horrific reactionary responses, but rather focused, hopefully, in the direction of party building and real revolutionary type responses. So that's where my head's at, and hopefully we can keep moving in that direction. So I'll leave on that one.
Amen, brother. Have a good one, okay? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Big love, everyone. We'll see everyone soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.